July 29th, 2024, the year of our Lord. Got a great show lined up today. Brenden,
got my
got
coffee.
that cold coffee going.
Mm-hmm.
And
I get the shaken espresso with an extra.
All right. Well, shaken,
I put
not
a little
stirred.
extra. I put a little
James
extra.
Bond would
I
say.
get a little left hand in there.
Well, I got the Master National Retriever Club cup going with a little bit of coffee and some Bailey's Irish whiskey in there, whatever it is.
Well, your dog's pissed at you.
Yeah. Well, look, we're ready to roll. We got Bo Carter, National Football Foundation out in Dallas, Fort Worth, the Metroplex. Chris Lee, Southeastern 16, and Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports on Georgia. We will cover, as you see on my shoulder, the map, all 16 Southeastern Conference members at some point during this show. Smash the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications on your Android and iPhone. Get ready. Get pen and paper handy, because here we come on Hewlett and Dunn's Monday edition of SEC Sidelines Sports Network with Brenden Martin and Rob Browne.
Rob, how many days till college football? How many days?
Do what?
How many days till college football?
Oh, 33. 33 days until the start of college football season. Wow.
That's what I just wanted to know. You're going to tell me every day. Okay. Now
actually, 33 days away, folks. We're here. We're coming. Get ready.
Okay. Let's go.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, man, I've got this esteemed panel of colleagues, Bo Carter, Chris Lee, executive producer Brenden Martin. Guys, 33 days doing that quick gazendas, as Jethro Bodine would do. That's 792 hours, I believe. If anybody's keeping track. Hey, driving home from Auburn Friday, I'm listening to my friend Chuck Oliver's show, the podcast. I didn't hear it live. I listened to the podcast version later in the day. There's Chris Lee on talking about Vanderbilt. Excellent report, Chris. Glad you're feeling better. We missed you last week, but let's get it cranked up right now. I love the new logo. That is cool. You know what? We're getting closer. A lot of people have. I think some schools started practice last week, toward the end of the week. Another season, a lot of storylines, but let's start with what you see happen, Chris Lee.
Where? Are we talking Vanderbilt or just in general?
Well, we'll start with Vanderbilt, if anything, if there's movement in the aisles there, but just the SEC, your vision of what's going on.
Well, with Vanderbilt, I think it's going to be rebuilt offense around mobile quarterbacks. I think we've talked about that a little bit here and there. They brought in 2 transfers from the portal, Diego Pavia and Nate Johnson. And if you're an SEC fan, you actually got to see those guys play against SEC teams a year ago. We know Diego Pavia beat Auburn a year ago at New Mexico State. And, of course, Nate Johnson. Sorry, Brenden. I'm starting off on the right foot with both you guys. I'm assaulting both of you.
Don't worry about it.
Nate Johnson played a part in Utah's win over Florida last year. So it didn't mean to structure it that way, but here we go. We're off to a rousing
Keep
start.
rolling. You got to get Bo next.
Right. So I think that's the thing. On the defensive side, can they stop anybody? They added some pieces in the portal at defensive back and defensive line, where they had big issues a year ago. So we'll see where that goes. They start Wednesday. As for the SEC, oh man, I don't even know where to start. I think the thing that's kind of got my eye right now is that whole thing between scheduling and how you're scheduled and how that's going to relate to can you compete for the national title. Because I'll give you 2 examples that are kind of sticking out in my mind. I think Missouri and Oklahoma are two fairly even football teams, but Oklahoma's path in an SEC schedule is much more difficult than Missouri's is. And I think a thing that's had my attention lately a lot is that whole thing of, okay, let's say Missouri goes, 11-1 with the loss to Alabama, but, doesn't rack up a lot of big skins. And Oklahoma goes, say, 9-3, but, by definition, you look at that schedule, go, if they lose 3 games, they're going to beat some really good teams, maybe even some top 10 caliber teams to get to 9 wins. And that whole interplay of how many games can you lose and how much is the schedule going to be weighed in the playoff discussion, I think is where I find my head going to a lot of times recently.
Yeah. Bo Carter, you were SID at Mississippi State, in the Southwest Conference office, the Big 12, now the National Football Foundation. You're with all these conference championships. You know everybody in the country. Sports writers, we saw it at media days every day. Biggest crowd, Chris. Bo was out there with me, over 1,200 credentialed media. Do you think what Chris just said is right? A 9-3 Oklahoma team with that schedule could get in over an 11-1 Missouri with their schedule, all things considered?
Yeah, possibly. You just don't know about all the political. We've talked about this before, and Chris knows about this. You've got Oklahoma and Texas that sort of ran the Big 12 for 28 years, and then you've got the Georgia and Alabama nexus over at the SEC. So,
yeah.
I mean, there'll be some backroom smoke-filled hankering going on there or whatever. And I'll be honest, I don't mean to be dissing Oklahoma, but I think they're going to have a Chris, I kind of agree with you a little bit, quite a bit on this. I think they're going to be hard pressed sometimes to go 7-5 or 8-4. They just, I'm going over plowed ground here, but the SEC is more physical than the Big 12. Just from week to week, and they're going to recuperation time is more than 7 days in those games. So it's they better, and their depth up last year was a little bit of a problem. So that this could really be a interesting season for the Sooners.
Chris, when we had Chris Plank from the Oklahoma Sooner Football Network, the sideline reporter, the Plank Show out on in Oak City in Norman. It's on 9 to 12 Monday through Friday. Awesome segment with him in the Friday football roundtable. All things considered, I think you're right. Texas is better prepared from day one with their personnel they have. Oklahoma got to replace all 5 starters on the offensive line and their quarterback. But Jackson Arnold's a pretty good guy that you get to replace Dylan Gabriel with. So I'll ask you this, Chris. Big 12, 1996, Texas won it 4 times in 28 years. Oklahoma 14. Oklahoma has won 6 of the last 7 Red River shootouts. I think the learning curve won't be that long for them, but I think they're just more of a humble blue collar program. It's one of the most tradition rich in the country, and they've got the hardware to back it up. But I think it is going to be a lot of fun having them in the league. But I don't see them going undefeated this year. I don't either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the teams they're playing. They got to play Alabama, LSU. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong column here. Texas, Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, Missouri. 5 teams that you're seeing mention a good bit in playoff discussions. Tennessee, another fringe team. And then go down to Florida, which I don't think is going to be a pushover. I mean, my goodness. The worst team on their schedule in the SEC is South Carolina. You go outside the league and you got Houston and Tulane. I mean, there's going to be games they win, but it's not playing Ball State and Akron. I'm just kind of fascinated by the structure of these schedules and seeing some other teams. Whereas Missouri, you start at the bottom of the conference and look at who they play, and you're saying, all right, who are the teams you probably want to draw this year? Vanderbilt would be one of those teams. And I'm looking to the right to look at the schedule to make sure I got this right. Mississippi State, if you're ranking the teams 1 to 15, State's probably 15. They're on the schedule. Go down a little further. Auburn, probably going to be more of a bottom half team than a top half team by most people. I keep rubbing it in. I know, but I mean, and that's just the league. Bottom half of the SEC doesn't mean you're bad. It's just what are your alternatives? Heck, the road games at UMass, Arkansas, another team on the schedule, and you guys missing somebody. It's just, it's just amazing the discrepancies in the strength of what some of these teams draw versus others.
Bo, when they put that schedule together in the SEC office for Texas and Oklahoma in the first year, everybody in the league will play Texas and Oklahoma over the next couple of years. Is that what it is? I took some serious gazendas in there in the back room with some guys with short sleeve rayon shirts and clip on ties and pocket protectors to come up with those numbers. You ever been in a room like that?
Yeah, a few times. And Chris, I remember from the COVID year, everybody in the SEC was clamoring to get Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
it's still the only 0-win season in Vanderbilt history, going back to 1894, Chris, or something.
Yeah.
So don't ever play an all Southeastern Conference schedule or expect major consequences.
Subject of discussion, and we're looking at the conference and where we are right now. You could have 4 teams. My top 4. I'm curious. I'm going to ask Chris, and then I'm going to ask Bo. At this moment, my top 4 are Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Missouri. I just think Missouri's a really good team. I'm not. I know their schedule's not as tough as the other ones, but I think Eli Drinkowitz he doesn't get enough credit. He's at Missouri, but other schools get a credit sometimes when they don't need it. But that's my top 4 again: Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Missouri. What are your top 4, Chris Lee?
I would probably go Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss.
All right, Bo Carter.
Ooh, that's a tough one again. Probably Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, maybe in Alabama. Almost the same 4, just a little bit. Kiffin seems to have it going down there, so I guess I'll against my Mississippi State and Vanderbilt roots there.
Yeah.
Well, they got a great ball club coming back.
In the interest of full disclosure, Bo owns shares in Vanderbilt. He's a Vanderbilt grad. So
all right, okay.
And I heard your comments, and I was going to get Brenden to get his top 4 when he gets a chance. I know he's working on a lot of stuff while we're doing the show. But Brenden, give us your top 4.
Florida Gators, and
Florida Gators.
Florida Gators, and Florida Gators.
Gotta go by.
All right, so he's working on stuff during the show, and he had a tree go through his roof the other night. So while he's doing the show, he's got tree men coming. And as my dad famously said one time when the guys came out to look at this tree, should they tear it down? He goes, boy, I ain't never seen a tree man give a tree a chance. It's got to come down. That's how they make a living. But I look around. Bo, you should have heard Chris talking the other day about what's going on at Vanderbilt. And there's a lot of things happening at every school. This year, what are we talking about in terms of revenue coming to each SEC school? Last year, I think it was about $50 million. And we've heard all these predictions that with Texas and OU coming in, and now they're here. They hadn't played any games yet. It's going to be 60 to 80, and all of a sudden, before we know it, it's going to be $100 million. Are we ahead of our skis?
I don't know. Obviously you'll divide it 2 more ways, so that will it cause a little bit of a bump the other direction. But no, it's with the TV contracts and ratings. That's the other thing. Texas and Oklahoma drew the highest ratings, I think, of any Big 12 football games for like 30 or 40 of the last 45 telecasts or something. They're sort of the bell, two of those bell cow teams in college football. So, but no, I think the sky's the limit. The Big Ten's just exploding. I think they're Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. They're talking about like maybe a $65 or $70 million next year or so with UCLA. Of course, I saw the other day that Oregon's travel costs are going to be $4 million more this year than last year for going to the Midwest and the East Coast all the time. So it's going to be a coin flip on some of this stuff.
Wow, Chris,
is Oregon still leading? Chris, you hear me all right now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. My my child was in here playing Fortnite, I think, last night. So. Computer got a little crazy. I was like, wait a minute, I'm seeing some
Fortnite
emote avatars going on. I'm like, wait a minute, my child's been in here. Oregon still have the most NIL corporate funding. Do you guys know? I know they were leading last year. The Oregon, obviously California, but do you know, are they still flush in that? I mean, it hasn't been that long, but I would assume they're still flush with actual NIL corporate money.
I mean, I think you've got, your lead booster is worth, I saw somebody throw this figure out there the other day, $33 billion. And he's not getting any younger. Yeah. So I don't know where that money goes, but I would presume there's probably some correlation between that and the fact that you're seeing Oregon pretty much a consensus top 4 team preseason.
The net worth of Phil Knight, $33 billion. Is that what you just said?
I think so.
I mean, I read that somewhere on the internet.
Okay.
For full disclosure. But
Hey,
I mean, we all know he's worth a lot of money.
Yeah. If you're off $1 billion or $2 billion, I'll forgive you. Okay. So you wonder, and you look at NIL. I think what's happening now, are y'all noticing this in recruiting? These kids are committing early. And if you're a Georgia kid and you commit early to Southern Cal, like Julian Lewis out of Carrollton, Georgia, one of the great towns in America. Hello, Sam Haney. I know a lot of my fraternity brothers are from Carrollton. Kerry Chandler, Tom Glanton. But look, let me say this. When you commit early like that, guys, what you're saying is I don't care what the people in state say. If they show me enough money, then I'm coming. That's all that is, because in the past, if you're a Georgia kid, I think y'all would all agree, or a Florida kid, and you're going to commit to Southern Cal or Notre Dame, you're going to do it and just show up on signing day, because the pressure, far be it from people like in the state of Alabama to put pressure on a kid to stay in state. But that's where we are. I think Julian Lewis ends up at Colorado. So that's where I think he's going. But I do think what that is, you're putting out there, this is what I cost. If you want to beat that, then beat it. And it's known. I mean, would y'all agree with that? A lot of these early commitments don't really carry a lot of weight.
I feel like, yeah. Well, Bo, you and I talked about this at SEC Media Days. How important is recruiting now, right? And how different are we talking about? Is the transfer portal more important? Do you build your team out of the transfer portal? We have transfer portal rankings now. We have power rankings. We just like we did with recruiting, right? We saw that this year. We're going to see more of that. It makes sense, right? How does a recruit just say, yeah, I'll go to you now, sign, and then now he's like, okay, well, I'm worth this much because the market said I'm worth this much, and then they use that to their advantage. I think the stopgap, somewhere is going to have to be in there for the NCAA. It's like, look, you can't do this, or you can't go and sign a deal, take money and leave, that kind of thing. I just, it feels like to me that now we're looking at the portal much like free agency, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Chris, jump on that one.
Yeah, except everybody's in free agency every year, including your own roster.
Coach.
Recruit. Well, here's one for you, Rob. Texas Tech got a Stanford's ace softball pick. This is softball we're talking about. $1.2 million NIL deal last week. So it's totally. Chris, you've seen this too, and Brenden and Rob. I think they're talking about a salary. I mean, an NIL cap at some point with this house settlement, which is going to cost everybody $2.8 billion. So it's they're and then everyone too. It's the profit sharing deal. It's like, Chris, you've seen this with Vanderbilt with the high tuition. There's not going to be much profit out of Vanderbilt athletics any given year. So their profit sharing is going to. Rob, it's sort of like a competing financial agency or whatever. The profit sharing may be a little bit nil. No pun intended for some of these schools.
Okay, well, I'm gonna throw this one out here. You're looking. Well, I asked somebody that runs an NIL collective a couple of weeks ago. He just volunteered this. He said, no, that house settlement is ongoing every year. I said, oh, it's not like a 5-year or 10-year payoff. And I was told, no, it goes on for eternity. Is that correct? Everybody's going to have to pay out this $22 million. I mean, because find me a student athlete that wouldn't go back and do it all over again for the experiences, the relationships, the contacts, the connections, the job opportunities. I mean, let's be transparent. You do it right. You go to practice every day. You graduate from your school, even if you're on the scout team, as a blocking dummy with a pulse. People go in there and they respect that. They see that V, that F, that A, that LSU, that SC for South Carolina, whatever. They're like, okay, this guy is not a quitter. I mean, I think the house settlement, but is that true that it has to be paid out every year forever?
I was thinking it was 5 years, but and then also part of the deal was they never. One of the settlement deals was they would never have litigation similar to that in the future. So I don't know that was Chris. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was one story I said on the internet again. That verification.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because by the time I figure something out, it's changed anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't put a lot of bandwidth into stuff where the solution is a little further off, because you got courts and this and that, and it's just it's all too much to track.
Yeah. All right, Chris, I know you just got a few minutes before you've got to catch a train, but I got to ask you this. Give me your top 4 quarterbacks in the SEC this year. I like to do list right now. Who are they?
I'm looking off to my right to make sure I don't forget anybody. Quinn Ewers has got to be on there. Carson Beck's got to be on there. Jackson Dart, I think, has got to be on there, and probably Jalen Milroe. I mean, Jackson Arnold, we don't know what it looks like. Kid at Missouri whose name escapes me.
Brady Cook.
Brady Cook.
Yeah.
Can he repeat? I don't know. Garrett Nussmeier, has he played enough? Maybe sleeping a little bit on our man at Florida.
Graham Mertz, yeah.
Graham Mertz, who is solid. I mean, I think I'd probably, well, and of course we don't know what Nico's going to be in the vein of Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma, but I think right now it feels like the safest picks are Ewers, Dart, Milroe, and Beck.
We could have September 21st at Gaylord Family Stadium in Norman, Oklahoma, a coming out party. Nico Iamaleava and Jackson Arnold, who is, I believe, the highest rated recruit on offense in Oklahoma's proud history. Bo Carter, you think about that game. How big, you've been to Norman, how crazy is that atmosphere? I don't know if I may have to go to that. There's something about Oklahoma that we've all grown up watching them. And if you don't know Oklahoma football, how can you not know it? I mean, that's television aristocracy in the 70s. It's a powerful brand. That brand is worth almost $1 billion now.
Tell me about it. And yeah, it's once the Sooner Schooner comes out and they start shooting that the Sooner rifle into the air, it's sort of like Florida after the Gator Chomp, I guess. There.
Yeah.
So I wish Vanderbilt had something. They've got the big boat horn or whatever there, Chris, and yeah, no. Several of us old Commodore alum, especially the 50-year people like yours truly, and this year, or don't like the James Franklin's the anchor down. It sounds like the boat's been stuck out in the harbor somewhere. So
oh man,
we still love the Go Doors from the 70s and 80s. I guess so. We're old fashioned, but anyway, the new Vandy alums may have a different take on that, I guess.
Yeah, well, I just think that you look at these crowds and what is happening out there at Oklahoma, Chris. Around the SEC, when you look at this league, and you just mentioned Nico Iamaleava and Jackson Arnold, 2 5-star, high 5 stars. They could be 6s, and they're not even on the list of the top 4 because they hadn't done it yet. that's scary when you think about the quarterbacks. But I tell you, one of my favorite guys of all time, he's just a good Christian man. I love Danny Warfel. I'm a big fan of his. And every time I'm down in Destin, I see the thing going over Choctawhatchee Bay, Danny Warfel Way, right there at the Mid-Bay Bridge, But he was there at media days. And Bo, you saw him out there in the hall. He's a big mentor for Graham Mertz. I thought that was powerful that the Heisman Trophy winner, he's got the Desire Street Ministries in New Orleans and all. He's there to mentor Graham, and Graham Mertz loves him. Graham's a sixth-year senior. Graham's a big dude. He's 6'3", 6'4". I think this is his 6th year of college. One more, he'll be a doctor.
That's right. Auburn had the Vanderbilt guy last year, Rob, the linebacker that was working on his PhD. That's a true story. He transferred.
Yeah.
So, Oregon's got the 9-year guy who's working on his second PhD.
Miami has the 9-year guy too.
Miami
9 years.
So, Chris, if we'd been in college, you remember we used to have the 5-year plan, man. This is the 6, 7, 8, 9-year plan now. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
I had a roommate on the 13-year plan, but I don't think he was getting scholarship help.
Yeah. Well,
I still haven't graduated, so it's cool.
Undergrad, they used to try to scare us when I was in school because it took me 6 years. But when I finally started making, I was like, okay, I'm making A's and B's. I'm getting out of here. But they always said, after 10 years, they erase everything. It goes back to 0. And I was like,
Oh, man.
Daniel Simpson Day has no grade point average. All classes incomplete. All right, Chris, looking around the conference, though, is this going to be one of the better years that we can remember in terms of competition, top to bottom?
Absolutely, if not the best. I mean,
it's crazy.
You got so many storylines. I think you got so much parity. I mean, nobody's talking about Kentucky. I was looking at Kentucky's roster the other day. That's a better team, I think, than maybe people think. South Carolina got a lot of guys coming back on defense. Short up running back, a place where they've been weak for a few years. I mean, I just think you've got a lot of teams that really patched a lot of holes, and I've been saying it for a while. The college football is starting to look a lot more like the NFL in terms of the parity in the week in, week out. This team can beat that team, and the gap between the very elite and the good is narrowing in some ways, it feels like. And I just think that makes for great football.
Well, I agree with what Chris just said, Bo, top to bottom. And just Oklahoma, that wagon, that Boomer Sooner wagon, Texas with Bevo. Who eats Longhorn beef? I don't think anybody does, but this is all this stuff from our childhood. It's all now in one room. I mean, this is what's so crazy, Chris. And so look, Chris, I know you got to go. I promise we'd get you out of here. I want you to stay if you can, but let people know how they can follow you because you do great work and always love having you on here. You're one of the better people in North America.
Well, thank you. It's always fun. Go to YouTube, search Southeastern 16. We cover SEC baseball, basketball, and football on a weekly basis, and I do mean that. We have now added, in addition to our usual content, we've got a weekly football show, a weekly baseball show, and a weekly basketball show, which are more big picture topical rather than just the news. We're going to preview every SEC team, going to do LSU today in football, and I mean, just a slew of content. So if you want to follow the league at the big picture level across all 16 teams, that's why we're here.
Okay. All right, Chris, take care. Great report.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Bo, you're talking about that. I'm texting with Ralph Russo right now. I met him at Media Days, AP's national college football writer. Do you know Ralph?
Very well from the old Big 12 and SWC.
Yeah, really good. He lived down in Jackson, Mississippi for like 5 years and knew Jackie Sherrill very well in the Ole Miss. And you just love these writers that there's something about the people that know what deadlines are. And remember the old days, you'd go into the photo booth in the press box and it was a tube and you would just rotate around in circles and develop your film. I remember being at a game one time with a couple of sports writers from Tokyo, and they went crazy watching football. Like, it was unbelievable. And we met George Somerville from Touchdown UK over in Glasgow, Scotland. That guy loves college football. And we had him on the show out there at Media Days. He's coming to America to cover college football this fall. Bo, you think about that. Jordan Hill was there. Jordan, 24/7 Sports, covers the Georgia Bulldogs. Jordan, what you think about Media Days? Over 1,200 credentialed media personnel there. You can watch the coaches at home on TV on the couch, but it's seeing them in person, getting to talk to the players in the breakout sessions, and more than anything, just meeting new people and relationships and connections at Media Days is really what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a good time. I always enjoy that every year. It's sort of the kickoff to the beginning of the end of the off season is what I always say. So it was really fun. Glad they did it out in Dallas. It was fun to kind of mix it up, kind of make it something special with Texas and Oklahoma joining. It was definitely a good time for sure.
I loved what Kirby Smart said in his remarks. He said, and this it's exactly where I was going. When you're winning like Georgia has won the last 4 years, 2 national championships. Last year, they lost to Alabama, but they'd have played for it, and they proved it when they took Florida State out for a public beheading in the bowl game. But Kirby Smart said they spent a lot of time working to avoid complacency, going to the Nike Leadership School where you learn everything about every teammate you have, what they believe in, what their identity is. He preaches against complacency. That's how you keep a dynasty rolling. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I think that how they handled this offseason, from what we've heard so far, is really interesting to me because I think it would be natural for someone to look at this offseason and say, oh, they're really driven by the fact that, they lost Alabama, they didn't make it to the playoff. But, I mean, a lot of the players have said they haven't really focused a lot on that. Carson said while we were in Dallas that, whether you went 12-0 the year before or 0-12, you kind of have to focus on the here and now. So, I think that this is a team that understands the task at hand, understands they have to kind of focus on the daily grind. And what you said there, Rob, I think Kirby has figured out in his time at Georgia is getting the buy-in between the players. And they call it their skull sessions. It's where they sit in their teammates, talk about their why, talk about what motivates them. I think that's huge, especially think about those tough moments. Think about those games in early September when it's 100 degrees and you need to drive 90 yards. When you know what motivates the guy lined up beside you, what they're playing for and what they're trying to do, I think it makes the task easier.
Well, jump in here, Bo Carter.
Oh yeah, it's Jordan. It's good to be with you too. These no more 2-a-days, but there's still plenty of nice heat out there, and a lot of I think that and Jordan hit on it too with the Nike leadership deal. I think they're trying to be a little bit more cerebral or whatever to the approach because, man, you've got air raid offenses. I mean, this has been going on for years, but air raid offenses, defenses shifting every 15 seconds or whatever. You just it's a thinking man's game. You can't be a college football or any college student athlete without having a good grasp of what's going on out there, seeing the whole picture in peripheral vision. You've got to really be. It's a totally different from maybe like G League basketball or whatever international, the Rugby Federation, which we've been enjoying watching during the Olympics.
Yeah. Jordan, Georgia, 33 newcomers on this year's team. Last year, remember what Kirby Smart was saying about Carson Beck? He'd been in the program for, I think this was his 3rd year out of Jacksonville, waited his time, worked hard. He wasn't sitting around, but he was ready when they rang the bell to step up and lead Georgia to undefeated regular season, kept that winning streak going. Who are some other guys on the team? We all know Brock Bowers, first-round draft pick. I mean, as far as the tight end goes, he was Georgia's equivalent of Herschel. And I mean, he could do it all. He's gone. Let's talk about that. And I know we say the wide receiver room, but really I want to talk about the tight end room at Georgia. They got anybody as scary good as Brock Bowers, you think?
I don't think they make them as scary as Brock Bowers, but Georgia's
Good. I'm
tried.
glad to hear that.
Right, exactly. But two guys that we're going to be watching: Oscar Delp. He was a big addition a few years ago out of Forsyth, Georgia. He's going to have his chance to step up. I think that he's had his moments, struggled, had some issues with some drops, but he's going to be pushed because they went and got Ben Urasek from Stanford, and he's a guy that his 2023 season was really hampered by injury. He missed several games in his last season. And I think it's going to be a situation. Probably is still your starter. He's a guy that's offense, understands the expectations, gets a ton of credit for the way he blocks. But you got a veteran guy that's coming in, and I think what's going to be really fun to watch. We saw this 2 years ago where during fall camp, Kirby was talking about the competition at tight end, and he was like, it's sort of a competition with the receivers too. You know, we can only have so many receivers and tight ends on the field at one time. I think you're going to have that this year with Oscar Delp, Ben Urasek, another guy, Lawson Lucky, who got some buzz last year. He's going to be trying to push in there as well at tight end. But they are very, very deep at receiver. I think we're going to see more 3 receiver sets than we've seen in the past just because they've got a lot of options. But it's on Oscar Delp and Ben Urasek to go out there and just have a fantastic fall camp to the point where Mike Bobo and those offensive coaches say, hey, we got to get both these tight ends out here. I know we're going to have to take receivers off, but it's going to be a chance for these tight ends to prove themselves because they've got big shoes to fill.
Well, you know, Bo, you think about trying to replace. It's never easy when you're trying to replace. You're trying to replace anybody, especially someone like Brock Bowers. But in Georgia's great football history, Terrence Edwards is the only 1,000-yard receiver they've had. I thought last year Ladd McConkey, who was an in-state kid, he's one of the best receivers league, and he ran like a 4.39 at the combine. Everybody looks different in boxers and when they're at the combine. But I'm looking at Georgia right now, and I see the blue chip index. They're at 80%. Alabama's at 88. Ohio State's at 90. Where is there a weakness? What keeps you up at night, Jordan? Or what are you writing about? Like, if there's a weakness, it's this or that. Tell us that.
I mean, to me, the position that I want to see a breakout in is into line. And I've talked about this a lot, and I call it a first world problem if you're Georgia. They had Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis. They didn't have him last year. You know, that just guy that just was going to, break through double teams and cause all kinds of issues. Now, they had decent defensive line play. I don't want it to sound like they were bottom of the barrel because it's still Georgia. But they didn't have that, just get out of his way because he's going to run you over on the interior defensive line, and they need someone to step up there. They got Nazir step back, which I think is big. He is their nose tackle. He's a guy that a lot of people thought could have went in one of the first 3 rounds this past April, but they get him back. They need someone to step up beside him at defensive tackle, and to me, it's probably Christian Miller, who's a guy that Georgia's really lucky they held on to. He had announced after spring he was entering the portal. Cooler heads prevailed. They convinced him, that he would have an opportunity, and it made the most sense for him to stay put. But they've got him. They've got some other young guys. Jordan Hall, a guy from Jacksonville, is actually a little bit beat up. Doesn't sound like he's going to be able to start fall camp with a leg injury. But they need him. Warren Brinson, a guy who started the season. Some of the younger guys who are just coming in. Some of the other young defensive linemen. They got decent defensive line play last year, but they caught a lot of flack for not having a lot of sacks, not being able to really affect the quarterback. And, they got away with it for most of the season and then didn't have a great game against Alabama, and you wind up losing. So, I think, again, a lot of teams would kill just to have this one issue. But to me, if they could have a guy break out on the interior defensive line, I would feel really, really good about Georgia's chances to win the SEC this year.
Bo?
It's like Jordan said, Kirby Smart just kind of retools every year. They don't have a whole lot of rebuilding to do. And man, I don't know. Yeah, defensive line could be a possibility. It could be a little bit of place to shore up. And and you mentioned Rob too, the 1,000-yard receiver. Heck, Georgia's always been very, going back to the days of Vince Dooley and Wally Butts. They've been very ground. Run first, pass in an emergency situation. So,
correct.
Jordan, you never knew the Emory Blar deal. The only three things in Darrell, only three things can happen when you throw the ball, and two of them are bad or interception or incomplete. But no, Georgia said those really big physical teams that just sort of ball control, run it down your throat, and dare you to stop you. So I don't see any change there.
Jordan, you look at the DNA of every school. I mean, they're all different. Georgia right now is the alpha. I mean, Alabama won the SEC last year, but Georgia has won 2 national championships in the last 3 years. They're picked again to be right there in the thick of it. This schedule, you open up with Clemson. What about Clemson do you know that we don't know? Because that's going to be a game. Clemson thinks Atlanta, like Auburn does, is a home game for them too. So I think that's going to be a rowdy crowd. I actually saw people trying to scalp paper tickets at the SEC championship back in December. And I was like, does that guy not know everything is online? But hey, some people didn't get the memo.
Yeah, with Clemson, honestly, Rob, I'm still kind of learning. I do think that they feel like those games that they lost last year were flukes. And the year is turnovers boils down to. And when I think about lost in the opener, and where overs for Duke off that upset. So, I mean, I think that is as huge of a game for Dabo Swinney as there is, just because that's going to be a really good barometer going into a year. And you think about a guy that's won 2 national championships. I mean, Dabo is, one of the top coaches, but, I don't think it's wrong to say that, they've kind of taken a step back in the last few years. And I think that, his approach to not really going after players in the portal, I think that that's kind of put Clemson at a disadvantage. But I think there's a lot of talent. I think there's a lot of kids on that Clemson team that understand Georgia is seen as one of the championship contenders. And you got some local guys. I don't know if Sammy Carter, who is from Jefferson, I don't know if he's going to be starting because he's just a freshman. But you've got a lot of guys that have ties in the state of Georgia that are essentially going to be coming home to play this game. I think Clemson has a lot to gain from even playing Georgia close. Now, I'm not convinced that's necessarily going to happen. I don't know what this is really going to be a contender. I do think it's a big opportunity for Clemson, and I'm sure that Kirby's just going to let his players know that Clemson's coming in with a chip on their shoulders and something to prove.
All right. You're seeing a lot of comments over here. We saw these graduation rates that came out. 41% on Georgia. We know Georgia's hard as hell to get into academically. I mean, our oldest daughter, Mallory, in the valedictorian from St. Pius X, did not get into Georgia, but he got into Harvard. And, of course, she ended up going to Alabama. This is before I knew her, before I married her mom. But, you've also got a lot of Georgia guys that are going after 3 years, 4 years to the NFL. And I know I'm not trying to be an apologist. I don't do that. But I know the history. You can pick any school and rip these graduation rates apart. But is that a big topic with the media? We used to hear stories about this all the time. And I just focus on the games. There's nothing I can do about that. But I want to get your take on it because you're a damn good journalist. I just know people that know you from Auburn and other places. And you get the thumbs up from people. But what are your thoughts on it? You don't have to spend more than a minute.
That's fine. I had to give those saying something nice. But no, I mean, one with some of those, graduation graphics, I would need to look into just to verify those numbers, just because you're not necessarily sure where they come out on. But I do think those guys leaving, is a piece of the puzzle that it does affect if a guy leaves early and goes pro. And I mean, I think it's something that does matter. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, we're not foolish, and we know that these paid to win football games, and
Yeah.
you want guys to stay in school, and you want guys to earn their degrees. And a lot of times you have guys come back after the fact and get their degrees, but I think it is fair to point it out, because I do think you want guys to come out, and obviously guys come to Georgia and places like Georgia to go to the NFL, but you want them to get an education too and not waste that opportunity. So I understand why people bring it up. It's one of those things I can't sit here and say, yeah, the graduation rate is 41% from, I don't know what year that graphic starts, but it does matter. But that it's one of those things with Kirby Smart. I don't know how much come up, and they're going to give those guys the opportunity to earn their degree. And like I said, some of them come back later on and wind up earning their degree.
Well, it's like our executive producer, Brenden Martin, said. There are click farms in India and China and Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, buildings for miles doing nothing but putting stuff like this out. So just because it's on Twix or the interweb doesn't mean it's true. There's just and I think those go back to 2016 or 2018. But Bo Carter, you remember, Bo's old enough to remember, and I am too, when players were academically ineligible. That doesn't happen anymore.
It's crazy.
Coach O actually had a guy. I remember the running back that didn't have enough credits, and like, how did they miss that? But he got $17 million. Which door do I go out of? I mean, he's gone now, but it is a different world. And you think about it, Jordan, in the SEC right now, recruiting it's hot. Georgia's sitting there, number 2, number 3. What is the problem at Buford, Georgia, which is right up there next to Dunwoody and the Mad Italian, one of my favorite restaurants in the world? Is that just transient city like a lot of those schools are in and around Atlanta versus the traditional, South Georgia? I watched Saturday Night Lights about night football in the SEC over the weekend on the color TV. And Vince Dooley said, well, traditionally we didn't play games at night because so many of our fans in South Georgia would get up at 4 a.m. and come up here for a 1:30 kickoff and get back late at night in time to go to church on Sunday. Your thoughts and comments on that, Coach? I'll hang up and listen.
Well, talking about Buford, you need to remember, Rob, Georgia's on a hot streak right now. They got KJ Bolden and they got Jake Pope from Alabama. So for Georgia fans, that's more Buford guys than they've gotten in about 12 years. But I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is, a lot of those kids, one, didn't grow up in Buford or at that school or grew up Georgia fans, but two, think about all the schools that go in and recruit that area. Alabama pretty much has a stamp down there, but Clemson as well. I think Auburn's getting back. I mean, judging by this past weekend, Rob. Hugh Freeze ramped it up, but people want Kirby to be able to build somebody in this area, and you just can't do it, especially not in a Spofford. And I always bring up, and I think I brought it up to you before, Rob, but I always enjoy when Georgia's getting ready to play Auburn. My dad's a huge Georgia fan, and he'll call me the week of the game, and he'll say, Auburn's got 27 kids from Georgia, and like just mad. I'm like, Dad, Georgia can't sign everybody from the state of Georgia. Well,
that's right.
Well, I know. You can't keep them all. You don't have all the roster space to keep every one of those guys. Yeah.
Jordan, I promised I'd get you out in 20 minutes. You said you got a train to catch, some stuff to do. But look, always love having you on. Every time you're on, you just bring your A game. Let people know how they can follow you and keep up with all the great work. And give us a retweet. Please appreciate that. And you bring a lot to the show. We'll help you out every way we can.
Appreciate it. Dogs247.com, on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at Dogs247. So, we are getting ready. Thursday's the start of fall camp for Georgia. So, getting ready to hit the ground running and just be busy until that opener on August 31st.
No excitement in Athens, huh?
Nothing going on. I was going to ask y'all if y'all had any ideas of stuff I could write this week.
I don't know what I'm going to do on Saturday. It's just 33 days away, 792 hours if you're keeping track. All right, we'll do it again next week, man. Again, thank you. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys.
Okay, Bo Carter and Brenden. Again, we're talking about it.
He's got that Georgia internet.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on today with the interwebs.
Oh, the internet. He always comes in with that internet. He's got that weak signal over there in Georgia.
I'm gonna see if we can get
really want to give him all that stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna get that thing boosted.
No, we're gonna get Jordan to get on some internet that works. That's what we're gonna do. Because I cannot fly to Georgia and fix this stuff.
I'm not sure what that is, but I tell you those graduation rates. I'm going to pull it up here. Here they are. That is since 20 in small print. Yeah, I was right. 2016. But anyway, Bo Carter, Brenden, right now, what we're seeing going on in the recruiting, it is a Monday morning, July 29th. We're about to go into that dead period. Practice is starting Thursday and Friday of this week throughout the Southeastern Conference. Last week we had ACC Media Days and Big Ten Media Days. Now it's time to start hitting and getting out there and doing drills and just, this is an alpha male game. Bo, we've got a few minutes here. Let's think. I want you to give me a prediction. Give me the team or two that you think is most likely to surprise on the upside, and then give me the team or two that you think they ain't nearly as good as everybody says or predicts them to be.
And you're talking about nationally or the SEC? Or,
SEC.
SEC, yeah.
Are there other conferences?
No, you're right. You're right. Sorry.
I'm kidding.
When you talk about the SEC, you can be talking about nationally too. That's for sure. They're like the dominant force there. No, I don't know. Again, we talked about with Jordan. I think Georgia and Texas are going to be ahead of the whole thing. I mean, they're the definite from a talent standpoint. They're at the top of the SEC and probably should hold up there. A couple of dark horses, maybe. I don't. You can rule out Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. They're going to be battling for the 14, 15, 16 spot. Hey, in deference to Brenden too, I think the Gators are going to be better. A coach that's kind of on the hot seat there a little bit, and who won't talk to a certain esteemed sports writer that we all know. Definitely needs to. When you're in that situation, sometimes you get the old win one for the Gipper syndrome. So I think the Gators might be in there.
I agree with you, Bo, but I guess it's just as Gator fan, I'm burnt out, right? A decade of this stuff. Like in 10 years, this is the 11th time I'm going to hear, well, this is the year they're going to be better. They're better this year. I get it. But from a media perspective, I mean, they've gotten better. I mean, again, I hope so. They've gotten better in the places that I think they need to get better in. So I'm hopeful as a fan, but I still hold my collective breath with the other Gators and say, well, I don't know if we can do another, 4-win season, 3-win season, regardless of the narrative out there that this is the toughest schedule in college football history, which to me is really difficult to actually figure that out because no one's played a game.
Yeah.
And so talk to me after week 1, week 2, and let's sort out who's where and when, because we all know that top 20, that top 25, that shifts, in the first several weeks. It's just like Plinko, Plinko, the game from Price is Right, Hour of Power. You play Plinko, you just drop the thing into Plinko and it just lands somewhere. You don't know where it's going to land. That's what it's like, a game of Plinko right now.
Yeah.
You don't know what the power rankings are going to be and who's going to stay healthy and all that stuff.
It's health and schedule. And what another team we haven't talked about, Tennessee, I think really is going to be somewhere maybe in the top 3. I didn't mention a minute ago, but Josh Heupel's a really mastermind on offense, and so they're if they can get some defensive play, I mean they're looking at maybe 10-2, 11-1 possibly. They've got they're playing some tough teams, some of the better opponents at home, so that could really be a detriment there.
I think too. When you talk about toughest schedule ever, you don't say that till after the season. You put an asterisk by it and say, Preseason, tough. It ain't the toughest schedule. I've seen teams have to play 5 or 6 top 10 teams in a season, and that's based on how they finished the season. Look at LSU in 2019. They beat everybody, obviously 15-0. They beat 7 teams in the top 10. And again, and LSU's proud and glorious history. How you fight is how you live, Rumble Boxing, absolutely. And LSU's proud history, outside of SEC matchups, they only have 1 top 10 victory in a true road game environment. And that's at Texas back in 2019. Okay? Think about that. They're hard to come by. Now, they get those top 10 wins on the road sometimes in the SEC. But with Florida, I think the key, guys, Florida's got to show major progress, even in their losses. You've got to show progress that you're climbing out of this hole, because the roster is not devoid of talent. Now, they need help on the defensive line, but that blue chip index has them at 63%, 4 and 5 stars. I don't know what their portal numbers are. I'm going to have to get J.D. Piquel back on with us this week, see if he can come on this tomorrow or whatever, and see if they factor in portal numbers with high school signees. But I do think Florida, Bo, you know what it's like being an SID. You know the pressure coaches are under. I don't think Billy Napier is going to get fired, because I think they're going to win more games than people expect this year. That's just my prediction, because they got a good quarterback. But if they didn't have a quarterback, I mean, they'd be that's a non-starter. That's like, trying to win the Kentucky Derby with a mule.
Yes, that's the key. And yeah, you look at when Mississippi State. Here's a case in point. Last year, when Will Rogers got hurt at Mississippi State, they just cannot put points on the board. Plus, they went from
Did he play much?
No. When he came back,
that was the worst case of coaching malpractice.
Oh my God!
I said it all year about Zach Arnett. I thought he was a great defensive coach.
Nice guy. You got 20 receivers and 3 running backs. He's out there trying to play ball control. So,
yeah.
Poor Mike Wright, who later transferred, went from Vanderbilt to Mississippi State and somewhere else. It just about got killed during the Arkansas. They were in the option play with him, I think, 25 or 30 times. It reminded me of the old John Bond days at Mississippi State. You remember those, Rob? I tell you what.
Valdosta, Georgia native, John Bond.
That's right.
Maroon and white.
with 3 flak jackets on, probably.
Yeah. Hey, but look, I think we're looking at a conference this year. We're going to wrap it up now. It's going to be an incredible year, folks. Look, Bo Carter, thanks so much, everybody. Folks, most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world, okay? In spite of whatever you may think, this is the greatest country. College football, 33 days, 792 hours away. We'll see you tomorrow. We got a great show lined up. Tell your friends and family. See you. Thanks for watching.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.